Welcome everyone to Chaplain Job Interview. My name is Ren and I'm interviewing my very dear friend Maren Aspaas today. You've been a chaplain for how long?
I took my first unit of CPE in 2003.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's almost 20 years. That's 21 years.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
I know.
And we're going to just get some of her wisdom today on the field of chaplaincy. So thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah. So I was raised Lutheran in like this tiny little town in South Dakota. And I think because of where I was, I didn't grow up in New York as a Lutheran or something like that, that I kind of thought that was the whole universe. And then when I went to Japan, after college, started to expand a little bit. And then in Japan, I was pretty inspired to become a Lutheran pastor. Went to seminary, but quickly discovered that I wasn't a Christian, which is a whole other story. Yeah, but and so I kind of journeyed into Unitarian Universalism, and was associated with the UU Church for a long time, and that's where I started my chaplain career. And since then, I have studied Tibetan Buddhism and shamanism in the Andean tradition, and now really consider myself just more of a spiritual person and don't really associate with any religion at all. Well, and I'm partnered, and I have a daughter, and I'm a grandmother.
Nice.
So yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
So Maren, what initially drew you to pursue a career in chaplaincy?
Well, chaplaincy kind of snuck up on me because maybe like some of the people who are watching us right now, you are in seminary, and clinical pastoral education is a requirement for your Master's of Divinity and graduation. And so that's where I was at. I went to seminary at United Theological Seminary in Minnesota, and ended up at the University of Minnesota Medical Center for my first unit of CPE. And I was really surprised how much I enjoyed it. I thought I was on the path to be like a congregational, leader. But when I was doing that, I would get kind of like on Sunday afternoons, I'd take these massive naps because I was so tired.
Yeah.
And chaplaincy didn't wear me out the same way. I really enjoyed connecting with people one-to-one. So it surprised me. I didn't know I was going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. You've been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
So as an interfaith chaplain, how would you define spirituality?
So actually, there's a book up here on my bookshelf, written by Dr. Lisa Miller, who has a PhD in Columbia University, and she's been doing research on spirituality. And I think spirituality really transcends any kind of religion at all, because in her research, both with children and adults, she's found that there's actually a structural predilection, is that the right word, to be spiritual within the human brain. That there's something within us that gets cared for if we have meaning and connection in our lives. And actually, her research has shown that it protects people from especially mental illness and chemical dependency. But and she, in the book about children, she really encourages parents to raise not necessarily religious children, but spiritual children, because having that wonder and their own unique connection to something greater than them really helps them develop as humans.
Yeah. So it's something about our humanity. It's sort of innately built in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a chaplain, it's not necessarily religious, as you said.
No. No, I think it, I mean, the way I see it, there are, lots of different forms of health. Maybe the primary ones we're addressing in the hospital are physical and mental. I mean, there's also relational health um, and things like that. But then spiritual health is such a huge piece in knowing who we are when we're going through an illness or we're there with family members who are going through an illness. How we understand what's going on, how we make meaning of it, the language we use that expresses our beliefs and like what's happening to us, and whether or not God or the universe is there alongside us, and the community that we have with us. So so spiritual health is a huge part, I think, of like just who we are as people in general, but then if you're going through really difficult time.
That's great. So you've been a chaplain for 21 years. So what have been some of the biggest challenges you've faced as a chaplain?
Well, probably one of the first really big challenges that actually came out more in my CPE group, because I was the only non-Christian in my CPE group. And it was a little hard for people to kind of understand that I was going to meet people where they were because that's my role, but I don't have to believe what they believe. And so the Christians in my CPE group really had a hard time wrapping their heads around it. And it's interesting that I'm pulling out that it was more like a collegial kind of challenging space, But I think there is kind of in general this assumption, because people associate chaplains as being like some 50-year-old white dude with a collar on, and that he's a Christian. And so I think there's still kind of this tendency that you have in our work to break down that assumption. And somehow not take it personally, but feel like, now I'm a non-religious person, I'm a spiritual person.
So what qualities and skills would you say are essential for someone that's interested in going into the field of chaplaincy?
I think like the first word that came to mind is open-minded. And it's not only for other people, but it's also within yourself. Like you really need to continue to do this work. I mean, they're going to give it to you in CPE, but I would say to continue to do this work, you need to be open to the fact that you're a changing human being. You're a human being who doesn't know everything. And every case that you work on, every patient that you're with, and every family is probably going to affect you in some way, and some a lot more significantly. And so I think just a real sense of that you don't know everything. About yourself or about life. Even though I would also say, like, I feel pretty grounded in how I believe the universe is put together and what I think is important. And I think that might be really important too, to have that grounding and know exactly who you are, so that when people ask you really serious questions, just about like, what happens when we die, or do you think it would be a sin if I killed myself? That your answer, even though you may never share it. But you, instead of being internally confused, that you would know yourself really well, but you could, I don't know, but you combine it with also just like this openness to discovery and not knowing how you're going to be changed by the work.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And there's also working in trauma, there's this element of how seeing those types of traumatic events or accidents can throw off your grounding. So
Yeah.
that reminds me how it's really important to know where you stand in life, or at least be open to discovering that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that it's possible to get a high off of chaplaincy sometimes when you help people? I feel like I've had that many times.
I would say I hope that it's always in collaboration with the patient or the family. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I hope that my joy is always a shared joy
Yes.
that they're having.
Yes.
But yeah.
Right. Yeah. It can be a very rewarding experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're talking to folks that have never had the opportunity to talk with anyone about these things, or
like there was this family I was working with at the trauma hospital you and I both worked at.
Yeah.
And I mean the patient had just been really sick, like highest level of care. She was on ECMO and stuff like that. And I'd gotten to know the patient and her spouse and the family. And one day I walked into the waiting room, the family waiting room for the ICU, and they're like all like a kind of a bigger family gathering there. And I was like, what's going on? And they're like, she's awake. I started crying.
Wow.
I was just like right there with them, like so happy.
Yeah.
So happy. Oh, it was such a great day.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There were quite a few days I had some tears with people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
You worked in a couple different level 1 trauma centers. Can you describe a typical day in terms of the types of cases you were working with, or the type of patient care you were doing?
You mean as far as like the traumas that come in? Or
and I think also because a lot of people are doing their CPE and it's in level 1 trauma centers and might want to know what they're going to be dealing with.
Yeah. Well, first of all, level 1 means the hospital is prepared to take anything. And so it can be the worst injury. Like we had a patient that was flown from California up here because their pelvis was crushed, and it was like in 18 pieces or something. But then there's house fires and there's explosions and there's near drownings. And so usually you don't want to be a patient in a level 1 trauma center, and it's the worst day of your life, probably, if you are.
Yeah, if you're coming in as a trauma.
Yeah. So I think I would say, kind of going along with what I was saying about just like how I pace myself, knowing that these cases could come in, I really tried to spend the time before someone came in the ED as calm and as just kind of ordinary as possible. It didn't always work if there's something happening in an ICU or something like that, but knowing that anything could happen. It's kind of like the team in the ED has all the instruments, the computers, the clean bed, the oxygen. They have that already. And I really felt like I needed to have my physical strength and my emotional and mental stability. In order to address the day. I think probably the most difficult things involve children, and the most emotionally exhausting have involved children. And usually, I've worked on like 3 different cases where there was a child that died, most likely of SIDS, But whenever there's an unknown death, the police have to be involved. There has to be a coroner.
Right.
And so, I mean, you can only imagine what a parent is going through when this happens. They've not only lost their child, but all of a sudden, like
they're being questioned about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And bringing their child to the hospital is the last time the child's going to be home, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going home. They're going to go home without the child. And
so
that's probably, for me anyway, working in a level 1 trauma center, that's probably the most difficult.
The saddest cases.
Yeah.
That's where support is so helpful from your colleagues.
Yeah.
You're taking on a lot and seeing what the community is going through in a given day. I wanted to ask you a little bit about CPE, maybe about your experience and what your thoughts on it in general for people that are interested in doing clinical pastoral education.
Yeah.
Because actually, Maren and I both worked at a clinical pastoral education center at the level 1 trauma hospital we worked at together.
Well, and I took CPE. I mean, I started in 2003, so it's like probably really different now. I'm gonna guess.
Yeah, and I did it in like 2009.
Wow. Yeah. So maybe the CPE they're getting where we worked is different.
I think it's different now, like different theories, or
yeah, probably.
Every CPE center has different theories that they teach as well.
True.
I think that's an important point.
Well, I mean, the instructors I learned from were really great. I have to say that.
And where did you do your CPE?
You mean like what did we learn?
Where did you do
it? Minnesota. Yeah. And I would say that if you're in CPE, dig into it. Like, it is such a great opportunity to be ready to be a professional. Just drop your defenses, you know, because you're a perfect human, you know, and then we all have stuff that we come into this profession with, and it's gonna affect you. So, really trusting your supervisor and the group that you're a part of to be vulnerable, that would be my advice. Yeah.
It's set up so it is a supportive environment for people's stuff to come up in the process, right?
Yeah. I'd say take advantage of it. Because you may end up in a setting where you don't have another chaplain that you regularly see.
Right.
We were fortunate enough to work on a pretty big team with a CPE center. So there was always somebody around that we could check in with and bounce stuff off of, and say, you know, whoa, look, this just really got to me. Can you answer the pager for a couple hours, you know?
Right.
So we were fortunate to have that. But yeah, and maybe those CPE group colleagues can continue to be people you connect with if you don't have colleagues on site wherever you work.
A lot of people after CPE continue to meet and for the rest of their lives, I've heard. And yeah, not my group, but I do love my group. I do love my group very much. I don't know why we don't stay in touch, but I really loved each of them so much. Yeah, and I'm sure I could call them up and say hi.
Yeah.
But there's something about having your life cleared for that year that you do a residency, right?
Oh yeah.
Like just having everything out of the way. If you have a family or partner, just letting them know, like, or working out how you can really be extra supported for that year.
Yeah. Well, so full disclosure, I was able to do CPE halftime. So I had like I think it was 20 or 22 hours of like clinical work and CPE, and then, you know, outside of that was paper writing and stuff like that. So it was really nice because my daughter was young and it was more reasonable to be a parent, you know. And I don't know if any CPE centers offer half time.
Yeah.
Which I think they should. So I basically took 4 units over 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
was
another,
so nice.
yeah, another way to do it is taking extended units or
Mm.
intern units where you're just getting one unit at a time and sort of spacing it out instead of doing that full residency.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a big commitment.
I know. And I have never, ever taken a 40-hour-a-week job as a chaplain. And I never will.
Same.
Never.
That's so cool. I didn't know there was others
30,
like out there like
30 or 32 at the most.
Yeah.
Because it's just so demanding.
It is.
It's so physically demanding, emotionally demanding.
Yeah.
Like, no.
32 hours a week at the hospital felt like 40 hours to me.
I know.
But I still got those three or 4 days off a week to decompress. And we were working like 10 or 12-hour days a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. After an overnight, you need like the next day and then the day after that.
Sure, yeah. Well, your body's sleep rhythms are all out of whack.
Yeah.
So, as a chaplain, you're working so close with patients and families. And to a certain extent, I think like chaplains are often with people for more hours sometimes than like any other helping profession in that way. Especially like in a level 1 trauma center. I remember being with families in crisis like 5 or 6 hours, trying to get breaks here and there. But in that kind of setting, what kind of advice do you have for chaplains in maintaining self-care and boundaries in those types of situations?
Well, hopefully you're not the only one, because I know that there are hospitals that are like a satellite or really separate from a bigger metro area or something like that, where you may be the only one.
Yeah, you may be the only one, or they're on a weekend or something.
Yeah, because my first thing is, would be to stay in contact with your colleagues if you can, because it feels really hard to tear yourself away from a situation like that, because there's so much involved. Like, let's say there's a car accident that involves multiple family members, and some of them have gone to surgery, and some of them got to the ICU, and their relatives coming, and it's like this, just this constant. And so when I've had colleagues present, I've definitely introduced family members to the colleagues and say, this is the other chaplain who's here, and they may step in a while, that kind of thing, because I know that I'm not gonna make it, like you said, 5 hours, because it's just, it's physically exhausting and emotionally exhausting. But I think if you were there by yourself, there really are, I think there are actually times of pause during a traumatic situation. Like when somebody's in surgery, or when they're in the cardiac carrying, like when they're doing, they're clearing out the arteries or something like that. And it's this procedure that's going to take a while. And you don't actually have to continue to stay.
Right.
And I think that there might be this feeling like, I don't want to leave these people alone because they're in crisis, but
like the family that's waiting there.
But at the same time, they probably would appreciate the privacy for a while and not having you around, and they can be on their phones and call people and stuff like that. And and you can tell them, I will come back at this time, or this is how to reach me, just in case something else happens. And you can tell like the nurses the same thing. Because I think if you've been going on for 3 or 4 hours with a family, I mean, you probably need to hydrate. You might need some food, and you also just need to like sit for a minute.
Yes. And how would you, in general, like, maybe not on such an intense case, but just in general, what are your thoughts on self-care as a chaplain in healthcare?
I think, well, I mean, I don't know if I can bring this up too, but like we're talking about what your day looks like. So I'm really a person who doesn't like structure, but I intentionally inject it into my day as a chaplain. I know that like I'm going to have this meeting, and then I'm going to go to pre-surgery and visit people, and then I'm going to take this circuitous route around the hospital, checking with the ICUs or whatever. And I feel like I build that structure, but also build in like, okay, and I also plan to sit down for a while here, and I can do some chart notes and stuff like that and have time away from the patient care units. Because I feel like if I've got kind of a structure, then when the chaos comes my way, then I feel like I am regulated enough. I'm like calm enough from the structure that the chaos is kind of like, okay, I'll go do this thing now that's out of the blue. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about like after you come home? Did you have any practices that helped you let go of the day?
Wow. Well, I recommend if you live walking distance to a hospital, that's awesome. You should walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, because for quite a while I was walking distance to the hospital, so that was really great. It was a great way to decompress, actually. Yeah. And in Minnesota, I usually drove to the hospital, and still, I don't know, just some time in between hospital and home is helpful. Sometimes if I've had like a really long, really difficult day, I will intentionally plan to get like my favorite Thai food.
Yes.
I will stop by.
Yes.
And I am going to my favorite place. I'm having the yellow curry and the pineapple fried rice.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. Like, eat well.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I always actually, I try to eat really well on my shifts too. Like I try to bring like really healthy food, and I'm packing it along. Yeah. When
Same.
I'm working.
That was good for me too.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like, if you can have a regular sleep schedule, that's really important for this type of work.
Yeah.
Which I didn't get to have.
I know.
So you've worked in both like an acute hospital setting, acute care setting, and mental health or behavioral health hospitals.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? What would you say, or what would you say are some of the things that someone should know if they're going into mental health or behavioral health as a chaplain?
Yeah. Well, I think health is health. And a lot of times mental health is stigmatized in some way. Like people have some kind of control over it. Like they could not be depressed, that there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
And really it's not. There's not parity right now in healthcare regarding the diseases of like depression and anxiety and PTSD and schizophrenia and all these. And so I really think it's important to come in with that approach, that illness is illness. And most likely people who have mental illness have been living with it for a long time. Usually people have depression for 10 years before they seek treatment. So, and it's usually significantly impacted their lives, their jobs, their relationships, and so much of what we might think of as like a full life, that in some way the mental illness has them living life probably not the way that they would really like to live it.
Right.
And they've probably been misunderstood by healthcare professionals in addition to family members and friends. So they may feel really isolated in their illness. And one thing I often did with adults was try to sort out how to get that community support back once they left the hospital, or how to feel that, and maybe feel it in the context of their religious community too, because and at least in Minnesota, I was well aware of the churches that were open to people who were going through mental health experience, as far as hospitalization and things like that.
So getting them well resourced when they leave.
Yeah. So if they wanted to try, because it's such a huge step to maybe trust God or trust a religious community, they feel so vulnerable oftentimes. So I would say that's really important. And then I think getting clear on answers to really difficult questions, especially the suicide one. But then also one thing that I really was grateful for was being able to talk with adults who are experiencing schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder, and really helping them sort out having a supportive, nurturing spiritual life versus having these delusions and these things that seem like they're spiritual, where it's, if it's like ideas they have about God or the devil or whatever.
Grandiose ideas.
Yeah. Or to really diminish things, like people who think they are so sinful, and it's connected to whatever it is, if it's a thought disorder, or if it's their depression or whatever. And trying to help them understand for themselves what a healthy spiritual life might look like for them. And then hopefully that spiritual life can be like this way to kind of push back at the strange thoughts about religion or about God or whatever. Because I worked with this woman, like the first time I met her, went in and talked to her, and she had been telling all the staff that Jesus was hurting her and coming into her room in the hospital, and and first of all they had to make sure it wasn't a patient doing that, but no one was bothering her, and the thing is, she was Christian, and so for her to have this delusion where she couldn't trust Jesus was a real difficult place for her to be. Like, she couldn't access her healthy spiritual life because of the delusion. So I think
interesting.
Just trying, if you're meeting with people who are having delusions or whatever, know that it's almost always like a traumatized brain, a really depressed brain that is getting stuck with ideas and images and things like that. And that they aren't necessarily like spiritually depraved. I think their spiritual life is there somewhere.
It's sometimes more activated in mental health. Like someone's spiritual life is like, it can be grandiose, but sometimes it's just very, very activated. So something about what I heard you say of just helping people to connect with a healthy spirituality for them in that moment. So maybe it's a place of discovery. You walk with people when they're in that space of like something they can connect with, that's a solid ground they can stand on.
Well, and I like when I first started working in mental health units, the CP supervisor said to me, there is nothing that you can say that will change a person's mental health. Don't worry that you're going to say the wrong thing, and don't think that you can say something to change their depression.
That's true.
To make it better. What you're going to do is listen and be there with them.
Just be there with them.
Yeah.
Which is a huge thing.
Yes.
But it's not with that motive that you're going to save the day.
Yeah.
You mentioned suicide a few times. Any thoughts on how you help people struggling with suicidal ideation?
I think, this is true for like a level 1 trauma center, because people will come in asphyxiated or injured in some way because they've tried to kill themselves. So you may meet them in the ED.
Yeah,
so
true.
It's not just in the mental
That's
health
actually
unit.
A really good point.
Yeah.
Anyone doing CPE may run into all of these different kinds of cases.
Yeah. I think I have not felt suicidal. So it's only like having worked with people who have been suicidal that I say this, but there probably isn't a scarier place to be than not having, I don't know how to put it.
Not knowing if you want to be here or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then I've met people in the ED or in the ICU who were disappointed that they woke up.
Mm-hmm.
And so those feelings that they're having of, that disappointment or just this, disconnect from themselves so much that they wanted to end their lives, that those are real, and they're scary, and they're hard, and you can't turn away from them. As a chaplain, you can't turn away from those feelings. You can't say, you should be glad that you're alive, or anything like that.
Try to fix it.
Yeah.
With religion or.
Right.
Yep. And I think a lot of people would think that was the answer. Maybe that were new to the field, or maybe really old to the field, and their training is like from a long time ago. I don't know. I don't know. But I think the modern field of chaplaincy is like really teaching how to be with people in these hard moments and not make it better necessarily, but just to really see, this is a really hard thing you're going through.
Yeah.
And what is the power in like sitting with people in that versus trying to fix it?
Right. Being with them in it. Yeah. Because I think suicide is someone who has died because they have untreated or undertreated depression.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's dying of depression. And either they've never gotten help for it, or they didn't get enough help for it, or whatever. It's if they felt better, they wouldn't. Mm-hmm. If they were healthy, they wouldn't die.
Yeah, sort of a state of trying to end their own suffering.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So being willing to sit in that with them and not change the moment and be there with them in the darkness.
Yeah, and that's something we didn't talk about, but that kind of ties in with all these other difficult cases we were talking about: car accidents, sudden loss of a child. But these situations that as chaplains we cannot fix it. There's nothing, and so many times you're there, like maybe, especially when you first start, you're faced with this realization that, wow, I really cannot fix the situation or make it better. Often people are in shock and they can't even speak to you. Mm-hmm. So there's some way that you learn as a chaplain to just be with, and that's sort of what CPE can help folks with, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's the question of what can you do, or how can you be in the midst of something like that. That's where your job starts as a chaplain. Mm-hmm. Because you're not going to fix it. You're not going to change it. You're not a surgeon. You're not, you're not going to do anything. And especially if somebody's died, then there's nothing.
Yeah.
Other than what we do, which is it okay if I give a TV reference? But there's this television show called The Expanse. Uh-huh. And a few seasons in, there's this moment where people are dying, and there's a chaplain in this series, and she is sitting with someone after they're dead, and this real, this kind of straightforward business, God, we have this and this to do person comes up to her and is like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm here with him. Well, he's dead. And she said, well, that doesn't mean that his humanity doesn't mean something. And that I'm going to be with him and honor that humanity when I can,
That's so cool. That was in that show.
It was a show. Yeah, and I was like, oh, good. That's a good chaplain response to a
It
calling.
really is.
I
Wow.
know.
I tried to watch it. I couldn't get into it. Maybe I'll give it another shot. Because I love sci-fi. So.
Yeah. Other portrayals of chaplains just may have made me mad, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Chaplains in the media. That's a whole other topic.
I know. Yeah, but I was like, that's what happens is, we know that the moment is holy. We know the space is sacred, where someone has died, or the time that they died, or their body is precious to their family. And when we are aware of that and can support that, and the journey of trauma and grief for the survivors will be affected by that, because it's not just a story about these two were in a car accident and they both died, but this is how we were able to be with this person's body when they died, and we were able to pray in our tradition, or we were able to, to bring more to the event than it just being a tragic death.
Yeah, like bringing light into dark places.
Yeah. Yeah, or compassion, empathy, community, tradition, whatever it is that's important to people.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, something about the like liminal space that chaplains find themselves in with people. We were talking about that before, but it is sort of this sacred place you encounter. Maybe in chaplaincy you could call it ministry of presence, where you're there with someone in that, and the power of being with them. But that when people are going through major change or loss, or even like suicidal ideation, that despair, that there is potentially something very holy there that maybe even shows up when supportive people come around.
Yeah. I mean, some people would name it, and maybe it's their ideas that they project on you as a chaplain, and they're like, they feel so calm when you're there. Yeah. They might tell you, but it could be their ideas, but it also could be the palpable presence that you're talking about that they're picking up on. Like there was a woman who, her best friend was dying, and it was so difficult for her to stay in the room. And she's like, I think I can stay here if you're here.
Wow, that's really powerful.
I know.
Yeah. And also that she gets to have that memory.
Yep.
That she was able to show up and have courage and stay there with her friend. Yeah. Where do you see the future of chaplaincy going?
Yeah.
Like for me, I shared on my last video that I see the future of chaplaincy expanding because the need is increasing, and we're seeing increasing drug addiction, houseless people, mental health, and just the chaos of our lives. There's lots of there may be like displacement due to climate change, or like just chaos with the trajectory of our world and end stage capitalism, as I call it. But yeah, how are you seeing the future of chaplaincy for those that are interested in going into the field?
I'm really opinionated about the word chaplain. I think we need to drop it. I call myself a spiritual health practitioner.
Oh, we should have started with it.
So I see myself as a person who, it is my specialty to understand spiritual health and to help the people I work with understand their own spiritual health and shine a light on it, nurture it, make choices to help it, like I was talking about Dr. Lisa Miller's book, The Awakened Brain, talks about how we're just kind of born and wired as human beings to be spiritual, and that having a healthy spiritual life is so essential to health in general. And it's different from psychology.
Yes.
And so I think that, like you said, I would like to see it expand. And I would like to see somehow chaplains still have a really good knowledge and understanding of religion, because I think it's foundational. But I don't know if they necessarily have to be ordained or, or like religious leaders, because I think if there was someone who had a master's degree in psychology and then wanted to be a chaplain, I think as long as they have the religious language and understand themselves as a person who either came out of a religion or doesn't have one, in relationship to other people, because again, the ethical piece we were talking about at the beginning, then I think that taking care of spiritual health could be done by people who weren't necessarily ministers.
Yeah.
That's what I would hope for.
And so that would be that requirement of endorsement by a faith body on the Army's list of approved religious organizations.
Yeah.
Or its endorsement or ordination by one of those churches.
Because religion is, I mean, in my opinion, really a collective spiritual community. And you may or may not agree with everything. Even if you go to church every Sunday, you may or may not agree with everything that's said there. But it's the community that you're a part of, or it's, something that you strongly identify with or benefit from. But it's not necessarily you as a spiritual person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there might be communities you're a part of that support you that are not on that Army list. That's always been my thing with it.
Yeah.
That my church was not going to be on that list. And so that becomes a professional hindrance.
Yeah.
On job applications. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be nice if that changed in the field of chaplaincy.
Yeah. Like if we could have something like social work has, where there's a test and there's an ethics board,
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It seems,
considering I think most of the people we run into that are religious, I would say are older generations, and that the young folks are not going to church. Like that's what I find, or maybe they're more spiritual than religious.
Yeah, and the teenagers I worked with, once I kind of opened the door, like, oh, this is spirituality, then they were just like rushing in.
Yeah,
they're like, oh my god, like I'm spiritual.
Yeah, there's freedom in that for them to discover. But going back to what you said, so you do not prefer the word chaplain.
Yeah.
So I know at my hospice job, I am a spiritual counselor.
Oh, great.
So that's my title there.
Yeah.
So a lot of like hospices are changing to that. So what were your thoughts on that again?
Oh, that I think spiritual health practitioner is the way I see me, because that's what I'm all about, is helping people have kind of spiritual life that they want, that they need, that supports them.
That's not necessarily rooted in Christianity.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, if they believe in a religion or pursue one, that just enhances their spiritual life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great. I think this is good.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks so much for being on this interview for my channel. Please like and subscribe. I'll be putting out more content, more interviews. But yeah, so glad to have Maren today, and to just hear all of your wisdom from 21 years of being a spiritual, what is it?
Health practitioner.
Being a spiritual health practitioner, or otherwise known as a chaplain.
Hey, I'm still learning. I am.
Yeah.
Still learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Well, you have to be in that frame of mind with it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thanks, Ren.
Yeah.